Hi everybody, this is Kyle from Jack7 Games. This is previously what was known as Games Post-Mortem, although this one technically isn't post-mortem because this one actually kind of released. And actually on sale right now for $3.99. This is Force Gaiden. And I know I've said this in the previous videos, but as with every subsequent project I do, I try to push the envelope a little bit more and more as to what I can do and what I'm capable of achieving. So, with this one is the first time I've dealt with 3D modeling. It's also the first time I've dealt with power-ups that can be acquired incrementally, and I'll explain more of that as I go along. Has a multitude of different control options. And actually I wanted to have it kind of compatible with a lot of different things, so if you want to play with the controller, you can play with the controller. Keyboard and mouse, kind of a standard one, standard like WASD control. There's also two versions of a one-handed control, which this is the left-handed, which means everything can be accessed via the left hand. And then there is... Oh no, I'm sorry, the previous one was all keyboard. This one is left hand. And this one is right hand. And this is supposed to be... It's supposed to kind of have a 80s... Go ahead and start this. Have like an 80s VHS aesthetic. Which it always had, but a lot of the static... And if you look at like the tops and bottoms, it looks like a worn out VHS tape. That kind of came from playing Cuphead for the first time. And seeing how they had like the 30s style film scratches and a lot of the audio quirks, I decided to implement something similar into this game. First time I've dealt with 3D modeling, as I said before. First time I've tried animating in 3D. Which is kind of why I'm not I don't know how I 100% feel about a lot of the animations. They are a little jerky at times. And sometimes there's things that I'm not a big fan of. But it being my first time trying to animate with 3D, I think it came out pretty well. This is also the first game I did with voice acting. Although I'll be the first to tell you I am not a voice actor. But it's a horizontal space shoot 'em up with a little bit of a twist. And the twist being is how you do your power-ups. And I'll show you that. First level is Urbanima, kind of like a Blade Runner-y type planet where business rules. Everything is owned by the Cranacube Corporation, which we have seen before in other projects I've done. Control is simple. Movement, shooting. You also can get bombs. There's a shield. There's a bomb right there. You also have an experience bar. Down at the bottom left. The more experience you get, the more of a standard type shmup power-up would happen. So once I hit this next level, then I can now shoot 2 bullets. There's also a multiplier in there, the shield. Everything also kind of has a wobbly sound to it. Music sounds like it kind of fluctuates in speed, like it'll go a little bit lower and slower or higher and faster, much like how some worn out VHSs will when they're not reading very well. So I tried to nail down that aesthetic, and I think I did pretty good with it, all things considered. To me it looks like an early 80s kind of sci-fi flick. Backgrounds are a combination of, like, the buildings are 3D modeled right here, all the ones that you see turning, and then 2D sprites for the very back. All the enemies are 3D models. Which was a lot to learn, and I am not very proficient in it yet, which is why a lot of the buildings and the enemies kind of have a very basic look to them. It's also why I went with cell shading on it, because it kind of hides the fact that there's not a lot of detail in them, so the shadows kind of pop out more. But it also inadvertently kind of sells that early 80s look, because CG was very, very basic then. It's not as basic as something early 80s. It's a little bit more rounded than what you would see then, a little less angular. But I think it fits the aesthetic pretty well. Cast this guy. So yeah, this was released earlier this year, being 2019. I worked on it for close to 2 years. Keep in mind, in that time, a lot has gone on. My job has shifted as far as more responsibility was put on my plate, and the hours I worked changed in the middle of this. I had my daughter. That took up a good chunk of time, where there was a lot of time where I wasn't working on anything on this, and I didn't know if I'd ever finish it. Here we meet essentially the first, really your only contact, who he's the one that kind of contracts you into the work you're about to do.
I'm still on my safer, utilizing your ship's data, so you were a member of Neoforce, a ragtag team of freedom fighters that either bravely or foolishly fought back against the tyranny of the...
And one of those characters from Neoforce should look a little familiar. If you look at the top right of the 4 characters on the left, that is the character you play in Shell, which you'll see kind of like a little nod to a previous game. I don't know if I'll do anything with the other characters or not in the future. Right now, that's not in the plans. It may be later on.
When I learned they were using my technology to enslave planets, I attempted to rescind my contract.
Obviously, they're not taking it well.
It's not me they're after. It's the core hyperstage array.
And that is...
my latest project.
Yeah, like, I'm not a big fan of how his left arm looks like it's kind of
Core hyperstage array integrates itself
crooked in a weird way. His arms kind of move very strange, and that left arm just went through his body.
Where is this weapon?
I did not notice that before.
Be installed into your ship by now.
My ship? What makes you think...
They have one of your friends.
I think this is the old model of the eye, too. I have a different model of the eye later on in the game when I wanted his eyes to look around. He kind of has this dead look on him.
Their blaster cores.
And a lot of his aesthetic came down to the fact that I didn't know how to animate speaking mouths. So I put a mask on him, so I wouldn't have to animate it. That's also kind of the reason why the guy we just talked to is a hologram. So I wouldn't have to animate him. He could just be represented by a image. Now, this is where you'll see the first part of my kind of inspiration. It's a shmup that kind of plays like Mega Man. You get to choose which level you want to, or which order you want to play the levels in. So, let's see. Which is one of the bosses I like to do first. I don't remember anymore. We'll start with Sarkis, which is a reference to something, but I kind of don't want to say. You'll probably figure it out. I'll just say that if you're from the planet Sarkis, then you would be called a Sarkeesian, and this is a planet of women warriors.
Fun fact, this planet's surface is 90% water, and most of the inhabitants live on islands surrounding the ocean and encapsulated mountains.
And I think what we'll do is I'll do this level, and then we'll continue the next level on the next episode. So we'll go through this. And this is supposed to be a planet that's primarily water, has some land, but a lot of water. And getting the water to look right it took a while to do too. Well, I'm not sure why my experience from the first level didn't carry over. I'm pretty sure it carries over from every level. At least it did on the ones I tested last. Unless I just didn't add that to the first level. I'll have to update that. So one thing I always try to do too, at least with this game, I try to add something new to each level. So this is one of the, I think this is the only level, if not it's one of the very few where enemies come from behind, which are these rocket guys. I'm also going to let these guys explode. I was trying to keep to where every enemy felt different, and there weren't a lot. I tried to keep not too many repeats as far as patterns and movement and anything like that. This is a fairly short level. This is usually one I recommend to do first, which is why we did it, because we're already kind of starting to hit the 10-minute mark. The boss should be showing up. And like those little floating islands right there, those are all 3D models as well. That whole background is a 3D model. The water is the built-in Unity water object, but I had to tweak it a little bit to kind of keep in with the cel-shaded look. All the bosses kind of have their own distinct patterns too. I don't believe I repeated too much with them. And also certain weapons help out with other enemies. Like there's a weapon later that I'll show you that it definitely would help with bosses like this one and later the one from the fire planet. I didn't realize how much you get masked in the water. But I want to kind of play with foreground, background. That's why he kind of flips back there and you can't shoot him. Ooh. And should be one more pass. There we go. And that completes that level. So, next time... Oh yeah, so now we have a new weapon based on elemental powers. So now we have the bubble core, which allows us to shoot bubbles. So, on the next level, we'll check out Vatra, which is the fire/lava planet. Alright, I'll see you guys next week.